Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for coming along in the middle of the day, in between the rain showers. I'm Joan Concannon, and I'm Director of York Festival of Ideas. That's my side hustle. I'm also Director of External Relations at the University of York, and it's a real pleasure to be able to do this. Now, some of you who are very politically engaged may, if you haven't seen the notifications we were sending out, may have noticed that I'm minus a mayor. And that is largely down to our Prime Minister deciding to call an election. And there are very strict pre-election period rules in what elected politicians of any hue can do or don't do in that period of time. So what we've done is reframe this particular event as a pathfinder that we hope will lead into another event post-election with the Mayor to think about the context and the opportunity of devolution coming to York and North Yorkshire, and how that will help to frame economic, social and cultural outcomes. But actually we decided, largely because I volunteered two very friendly city colleagues into helping to rebuild the panel, what we look to do is to create this as a pathfinder where we're starting off with the world of York business and thinking about ways in which we can all work together. But I'm also very excited, and it was one of the key reasons why I didn't want to abandon this panel, is that one of the most interesting global phenomenon is the Mondragon Corporation. And I will introduce Germán in a little bit. But for now, what I'm going to quickly do is introduce the four panel members, but I'm especially going to introduce Sally, because this event is being brought to you through our fantastic collaboration with Aviva, who are just an amazing anchor institution in the city. So I'm first of all going to hand over to Sally to introduce herself and talk about why Aviva have become involved in this initiative, and then I'm going to introduce the other panel speakers as they come on, and then we'll have lots of time for conversation and interaction and engagement with all of you. But Sally, over to you first.
Thank you. And I am going to use my notes for this introduction, just so I don't want to miss anything, because this is the main Aviva bit, so I'll make sure I don't capture anything. So, as Joan said, my name's Sally Dillon. I'm from Aviva. If people have seen my bio, it says I'm Head of Transformation, but I've recently been appointed as the York Site Ambassador. So as part of that role, it's to connect businesses and to connect the community together and develop good business benefits for business, but more importantly, sustainably enhance the community we serve. So that's my new role. We're at the very, very early stages, and some of the people that work in that team at Aviva are here today. So why is Aviva sponsoring this event? As a member of the York Economic Partnership Board and one of the original organisations that signed the Good Business Charter, a place-based community-led method of working through mutual support, shared creation and long-term sustainability is core to the Aviva values. It's also mine personally. And what we do today is how we're going to explore that together and how we can work together, how we are working together, but how we can work together in the future and the benefits of working together across all the different sectors in the city. On a more personal level, myself and the colleagues from Aviva that are here are in a really privileged position. We have good jobs in a company that cares about us, and personally I know I can live with relative comfort in this city. I cannot pretend to know all the real issues going on in the city. We know, as I say, this city is wonderful, but there are 10,000 people in the bottom 10% of the deprivation index. 11.5% of our children live in low-income families, and the Wi-Fi scheme in York is going to run out of money for the first time in September. It's the city now, and certain pockets of the city, particularly on the west side of the city, is struggling. And Aviva, you know, I'm very, very lucky to have not experienced these issues, but we need to listen, and we need to listen to the community that we're based in and have community-led support. And there's a number of things that are happening at the minute, because historically, and I'm going to sit here as Aviva going, historically, we've scattergun support across the city, and we've helped one charity here, or sponsored this thing here, or we've done something here, and it's fine, but actually, if we all work together, in the private sector, the public sector, the voluntary sector, just think what a difference we can make if we can pick one or two things and focus on it and really go after it. So we've got a new place-based board that we'll talk a bit about today, and the Pride of Place board is pulling those people together to really start focusing on that. And Jack, who's in the room here, has started to pull together that with Kieran from the university. As you all know, York is, a wonderful city. But it's like a shiny tyre, and every spoke is shiny and tree-lined and wonderful. And then you go off those spokes, and there's many areas of deprivation across the city. And We struggle because of that in York. We struggle because of funding, because our postcodes don't quite work and we don't quite get the funding that we want. So we need to take it on ourselves. And that's what we're looking to do. We're going to do something ourselves. We're going to listen to those communities. We're going to co-create solutions. We haven't got all the answers. But as an organisation, we can focus our efforts. No more scattergunning. We're going to try to get a bit more focused and make a real sustainable difference. And that's why I'm here today. So we'll get a chance to talk about the Good Business Charter. We'll talk about the new Pride of Place boards and some new initiatives. And I can see Lydia, who's here. Hopefully we'll get a little chance to talk about the Place as well, which is the first of those big initiatives in York, which is in the Westfield area, in Chapelfield area of York, where we're actually focusing businesses and the voluntary sector with the university to actually do something brilliant for our city. And that's why we're here.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
So I want to just finally place this in the context of the Festival of Ideas, which was established 13 years ago. And it was really about how do we all come together to be more than the sum of our parts. I had a very long list of people coming to the university saying, we're not engaged enough, we can't really have our voice heard. And so this platform and the collaboration of working with about 100 organisations across the city is precisely to create that convening platform to allow us to come together to think about the city and the context of the city and its residents and how we can do more for each other. So today is really about that kind of business environment, but it is very much in the context of business thinking about community, and really struck by models in other cities, particularly across Europe, in the ways in which they have top-down economic strategy and business engagement and business investment, but bottom-up community empowerment. And so those are some of the themes that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to start off with Andrew, and I'm going to truncate his very long bio that his team sent me. But Andrew is probably well known to many of you in the audience and has been a very inspirational, very active, very hands-on lead in terms of our business improvement district. And he's also got a long career in commercial activity and events management, creates numerous business support programs. And so we're going to kick off with Andrew to give a kind of helicopter perspective of the business environment in York, the work of the bid, and how it transcends that top-down and bottom-up activity, and where he sees the future in the context of where we are now with a devolved political and economic opportunity. So Andrew, let's start off with you.
I don't have to answer all of that in 5 minutes, do I? Give it a go. Yes, I mean, I think just, I mean, Joe was saying it's quite a long bio. That's because I've got quite a random eclectic things that I do, and never really knew what I wanted to be when I kind of grew up, which I think is reflective in my career. But yeah, primarily I'm here supposed to talk on behalf of me running the York Business Improvement District, which represents about 900 businesses in the city centre. And I think maybe, some of those things that Joan just alluded to in terms of, how we get that business engagement, working with other stakeholders in the city, that might kind of come out a little bit more in the panel side of things. But I also, as part of a partnership, I kind of involved in hospitality. So we've got a couple of bars in the city centre. We do pop-up bars around the country. I run a distribution business as well. So I suppose what I'm saying is, as well as doing the representation of businesses, I'm in there as well, seeing the day-to-day reality, particularly from a small business point of view. But I think in terms of, this overarching discussion about good business, and I hope I'm not out of context here, but I just thought I'd maybe give 3 examples of what I would consider, good business, and then maybe give a couple of anecdotes from my career. So I think for me, and Joan's touched on this a little bit about the ability to collaborate, I think you can only do that actually if you have visible plans and strategy. I think, yes, absolutely, you do need feed in from the bottom up, but unless there is some overarching plan that actually people can buy into, I think that's where often, disconnect can happen. And if I go back to, one of my first ever job at Newcastle Airport, I worked in the master planning team there, and I had the glorious job of going out doing community consultation with residents close to the airport, who naturally were always worried about what were you going to do from a development point of view? Was the runway going to come closer to them? All those kind of things that naturally communities are worried about. And I think one of the best tools we had, and bearing in mind this would go back to the late 90s, you know, virtual reality started coming out, and it just made my job so much easier being able to say, okay, yes, we are looking to expand, you know, where the apron facilities, you know, where the planes park. However, to mitigate that, we are looking to do green planting. And I was able to click a button, show, you know, visibly that we were actually thinking about those communities, and the ease that made to my ability to kind of do that communication was huge. So my point is, I think the ability to have plans and strategies, but be able to actually have ways of communicating that with people, I think is crucial to businesses. And that's not just to the partners you work with, but obviously if your employees can buy into that as well, then that is crucial as well. And that kind of leads me to, I suppose, the second part, you know, my second point is, I think relationships in business. I mean, we often talk about our personal relationships, but actually, you know, relationships are just as crucial within businesses. And, you know, I think those soft skills in terms of our relationships with our colleagues, relationship with partners, those are often undervalued, if I'm being honest. I mean, I've worked in big companies as well as small ones, and often relationships are kind of put to the side when, you know, hard business decisions on finance need to be made. They often go out the window, but actually they are the things that make businesses tick over. I mean, again, just a little anecdote. We run Thor's Teepees. We put up a tent every year at the Principal. And if you remember those awful storms that came through in December, I mean, we didn't advertise this widely, but our tent got knocked down completely by one of them. But the reason why people didn't recognise it is because we rebuilt it literally within 24 hours. But the only reason we were able to do that is because when our colleagues in the event industry heard what happened, I didn't have to actually make calls. People phoned us and said, oh, do you need a hand tonight? And out of nowhere, from being a bit despairing, thinking how we're going to open tomorrow, we had 15, 20 people turn up, volunteered their time, and we rebuilt it within 24 hours and we were operational the next day. So my point being is that would not have happened if we didn't have good, strong relationships with those people. We have done vice versa. So anyway, just a little anecdote there. And I think, you know, my third point I was just going to say was, you know, business has to be enjoyable. You know, it's an easy thing to say, but, you know, making your workplace an enjoyable place to be, empowering your staff, and also recognising success, I think, again, can often sometimes get forgotten about in the day-to-day. And those things can, you know, they could be small things. Again, when I used to work in the events industry, we used to do weddings. You know, we had teams going out. I mean, we're doing 25 weddings a weekend sometimes. So the staff were, you know, putting in 70, 80-hour shifts. And it was difficult for us, I suppose, as inverted commas, the office team to see them, because sometimes we'd be coming back at 11 at night. But we used to just do little things like, you know, if we knew they'd worked a long week, just leave a 4-pack of beer, you know, for the teams. And it was amazing how just those little small things really kind of celebrated the success. I mean, obviously we did other things at quieter times of the year, but it was really thinking about, you know, what's going to show that appreciation and make them feel like we're all working together. So I suppose, like I say, you know, recognising your staff within that is absolutely huge, and just, even if it's just little rewards, putting that in. So I suppose, you know, I've just tried to give 3 examples of what I would consider good business. I know we're going to come into a lot of detail there, but hopefully a little bit of flavour about me and 3 things that I would consider very important.
Thank you very much. I think those themes of collaboration and respect for staff will come up again in the conversation. I'm going to pick up with Stuart, who is chair of probably a very iconic York company, which is Pavers Limited. And I love this. He started at Pavers for a few months and ended up staying for 44 years. That's quite the shift. But also growing the business from 2 stores to about 180, which is also a hell of a journey. And as now chair of Pavers, he's got extensive experience in retail, traditional mail order, internet retailing, international supply chains, and more recently, which slightly freaks my marketing team, AI and marketing. Charity now also taking a lot more time, so I'm interested in that mix of how to do good business, Stuart, in your lifetime's experience, but also some of the charitable endeavour that you're now deeply involved in. So I'm going to hand over to you to how to do good business.
Well, it's an honour to be here to share the journey of Pavers in York. So Pavers was founded in 1971 by my mother, as many women in that era found, she couldn't raise the finance. She asked for £200 from the bank. They said, no chance. But they did offer her £200 for a settee, which she took, and we never got that new settee somehow. So fast forward to today, we've actually grown into quite a sizable enterprise. We've now got 190 stores, just short of 2,000 employees. And recently I had the privilege of passing the baton of leadership to the next generation, so ensuring the legacy continues and they can add more vigour and vision into the company. So, during my extensive travels for work and charity, I've found that people all have the same wishes. It's basically to get opportunities and to leave their children with a better life than they've got. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the west side of York or India or China or anywhere else, it's always the same. So I enjoy spending time mentoring young people. I prefer to break the ice with a bit of intrigue, so I don't just look like another grey-haired old bloke trying to tell them what to do. So I don't introduce myself in the usual manner. I say, I've been kidnapped on the Chinese border, held at gunpoint in India, crashed a plane, jumped off a plane that had a fire in the hold, and witnessed a bomb explosion nearby. So what do I do for a living? You get MI5, SAS, this, that, and that. And then when you tell them, no, I bought and sold a few pairs of shoes and done a bit of charitable work, it grabs their attention. So one of the guys that came and listened to that from York College recently emailed me to see if we had some work for him, and I think hopefully we're taking him on. He went on to win the competition that we ran with the Merchant Adventurers for the best product idea that they could come up with at York College, and we sent them to Guangzhou in China, to the biggest trade fair in the world. And that was an amazing experience for the 4 children that went. It just opened their eyes to the opportunities, and also there is a world outside of the UK and Europe. It's a different world, but it's a big, huge place, and there are so many opportunities there. So, as a family business, we prioritise long-term investments in people and strategy. This approach starkly contrasts with the often short-term focus of private equity-owned businesses. It's a mindset that I believe is essential for the prosperity of our communities and should be adopted by our next government and the new mayor. At Pavers, we believe in keeping business simple. We love and respect our customers. We offer the best product at a price they are willing to pay. We employ people who genuinely like people. And we plan for the long term, but stay agile enough to change course if needed. Reflecting on my time as managing director, the 2 things that are my key accomplishments are, firstly, maintaining family relationships between 3 brothers in the same business. That was never an easy thing, but we managed to do it. And secondly, establishing the Pavers Foundation, which is now, we founded it after my mother died, and we used some of her inheritance to do it, and we've now given over £2 million away in the last 5 years. At the last biannual meeting, we gave away to 100 causes that our colleagues put forward to us. So giving away to things that really mean something to our over 5% of our colleagues was really inspiring. It goes to nearly all the shops, and so it really makes a difference. So last thing, short-term thinking, trend-driven investments and one-size-fits-all policies simply don't work. We need sustainable jobs and fulfilling lives for everyone, whether it's in the rural areas, old heavy industrial sites like Skinny Grove, or the beautiful city of York. I hope our mayor will use his resources wisely to spark regeneration and investment across all these regions.
Thank you very much. And now to Sally to talk about the specifics of the role of Aviva in driving that agenda of how to do good business.
Yeah, thank you. And I thought I'd been at Aviva a long time. I was 20 years last week, so 44. I've got a lot to live up to. So in Aviva, as I say, people know we're a global business, and we're incredibly lucky to have done a lot of the things already when we had to sign the Good Business Charter. So in that charter, there is things in there such as real living wage, fair hour contracts, focus on employee wellbeing, D&I, environment, employee representation, and sort of commitment to sourcing suppliers, all that great stuff. We're really lucky. We're a huge organisation, and most of that stuff, in fact all of it, I think we were doing it already, so for us to sign, and with some of the other partners I think are in the room, was quite easy to sign. We really want to champion that though, and help other organisations get on their journey to sign that as well, because it's really important that we treat our employees properly to then contribute to the city we're based in. We've got, I think 100 people, 100 organisations have now signed the Good Business Charter in York, but it's a drop in the ocean. So we need to talk more about that, and hopefully we can talk a bit about that today. In terms of social action and investment, I think in the past, if we reflect back in the past in Aviva, we've been huge in Aviva. We've got 2,000 staff now. We've probably had 3,000, 4,000 in the past. It varies up and down depending on strategy and what we're doing. And we've supported some really successful initiatives. Things like Career Ready, which I personally I chaired the board for that, which is focusing on getting young people ready for work where they're struggling from a social mobility perspective. In fact, we host the opening ceremony for that event in this room, which we bring sort of 100 students into this room who... Oh, sorry, that's me speaking. We invite 100 students into the room who never get an opportunity to come somewhere like this, and then we take them on a year's programme, and at the end we bribe the Grand to offer them an afternoon tea and a big dinner at the end, and actually we take them through, and seeing the students at the end of that is just amazing. So we've done some projects like that up to now. We sponsor York Pride, we have significant volunteering through York Cares. But we need to get better. And I think our reflection is we need to do better. And I was talking to someone from Nestle yesterday, last week, and we get it all the time where people can we sponsor this? Can we support this? How do we help this? It's really hard for us in Aviva. As I said, we sit there and go, every idea is brilliant. We want to support them all, but where are we best placed to support, given the knowledge in Aviva, the capability of Aviva, to make sure we focus better? So, over the last few years, our sustainability team has been developing our place-based strategy. So we have a central strategy, and a lot of organisations do, but then we drop it down locally and go, right, what are the local needs and how can we now support in the local needs? And I'm really excited to say I was appointed as the York Site Ambassador, but I now have a full-time, well I will from September, a full-time role, a community manager, focused full-time on working with our community and making sure we support people and our communities in the way they need. And their main role is listening. It's nothing flash or clever. It's about listening to the community, and then we think about how do we focus, rather than whoever happens to be friends with somebody or someone's spoken to someone in the past. That's not the way someone like Aviva should be working. So we're really trying to change the dynamic of that. So we're working in partnership with the business in the community, so the BITC, and we've committed to our place-based strategy. And we're hoping that BITC will be able to set up a structure in York. So that's one of the things, bringing together all the different organisations. And as I say, we want to champion this in a few ways, and we've got a few steps to start with. So working with the university, we've established the Pride of Place board, which is amazing. I've been trying to tap up Stuart to join, to connect all the sectors in the city, private, public, voluntary, to collaborate and harness resources to optimise economic opportunities, address societal issues and deliver long-term transformational change in York. We have to unify across that shared vision, identify opportunities to coordinated effort and make tangible, measurable differences rather than just tap here, there, everywhere. And as part of that, and this is a plug because it's dear to my heart, and as I say, and to Lydia's, we've the newly established place, which is very confusing because we have a place-based strategy and a new place called The Place, so bear with us. So the place is, and if you want to speak to it, speak to Lydia afterwards, because I am not the expert. The place is a newly formed community centre in the Chapperfields area. We've been working with the leaders of Westfield Primary, with York High, to really provide a community centre slap bang in the middle of that area to support our young people. These are the children that might not necessarily want to go to school every day, that they're struggling for food, they're struggling for furniture. I mean, I go into all the schools in York as part of my role, and I'm really lucky to do that. There is a stark difference when you go into York High. Me and Sally, my colleague here, when there is kids asleep at the desks, and when you speak to the teachers, why are they asleep? It's because they haven't got a bed to sleep in. This is ridiculous in a city like York that we're struggling with that. So to provide a community centre where there's a safe place, and the work that's been done so far, it's about building trust in the community. And that's not Aviva been doing that. That's been the university and their team really building trust in the community to say we're going to be here for the long term as this community centre to support that. Aviva is there, so what's that got to do with Aviva? Well, we're there as the employability partner. So we're there to sponsor the employability programme, because ultimately we want these young people to go into work. So we're going to be doing skills-based training, skills-based volunteering in that centre, and providing support to the staff and the volunteers and the students to really, hopefully, help. But we're there to help and listen and go where we need to be. Ultimately, we need to raise the attainment of those young people and help increase social mobility and decrease deprivation in that area, and that's the purpose of that project. So the couple of projects that we're working on, it is a drop in the ocean, but that is not just Aviva and the university. Hiscox are involved, other areas are involved, and I think it's worth saying that good business and solving some of these problems behind good business is not something we should compete on as businesses. This is something we should work together in partnership on for the better, sort of the improvement of our city. And I know Aviva and Hiscox are, you know, meant to be not friends. But actually, Career Ready, we've worked together on. The Place, we've worked together on. And actually, when we start to get organisations that may be competitors in other fields, community is not the area to compete. So the more as a room and the more everyone getting together and focusing on these things, it's really important.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
It is really phenomenal how much business has changed in the last 3 or 4 years even, and I think perhaps the pandemic made us all think differently about what our priorities are in the shaping of our communities. And I remember the Supper Collective and the huge endeavour that went across the city, where businesses did actively start to reconsider and rethink what their roles and responsibilities are. And it's fantastic, but there is this amazing international example that I'm going to introduce you now, which have been the key drivers of a global cooperative movement. I was talking to Germán last night, and we were talking about this in the context of the cooperative movement started in the UK, and then Germán and Mondragon industrialised it. It's a bit like football, which also got invented here, and then Spain and Italy took over. But let me introduce you to Germán Lorenzo Ochoa, who is the Deputy Director, Global Public Affairs and Communications, it's an even longer title than mine, at the Mondragon Corporation. He was previously the Asia Pacific Director of Mondragon, as well as the Business Development Director at Intergroup Far East Limited Hong Kong, International Purchasing Director, regular visiting professor at the Mondragon Business School. They have their own business school. It's a really interesting example that I always think York sometimes can learn so much from other examples. My phrase that my teams know very well is let's not reinvent fire. So we're here to learn and to listen to this incredible international example. Germán, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. It's an honor and a real pleasure to address to you these words, these fast words on behalf of Mondragon Corporation, Mondragon Cooperative Corporation, which, well, we have our own way of doing business. We do this our way, you know, and I will start saying that maybe for us, a good business is something that we define as business with purpose, as business done by people who's got maybe a different endeavor, a different aim than only making money and only increasing shareholders' value, which is not bad, but we believe that business should be much more comprehensive. Business should be a way of transforming society, of making people better, of trying to improve communities, you know. And how do you do that? You know, well, we've done that for the last 80 years, and we've done it in a very simple way, creating jobs, creating sustainable, dignifying, long-lasting jobs, preferably cooperative jobs, you know. in our Mondragon Corporation, which we are based in Mondragon town, quite in the Basque Country, near Bilbao city, 1 hour from Bilbao, more or less, to the east, to France. We are now over 85 cooperative companies that they are owned by the workers. We are doing more than 11,000 million euro turnover, and we are organized in different areas. We have industrial companies, we have retailing companies, we have our own bank, our own insurance and pension fund companies. We have also knowledge division with our own university, with 14 research and development center. So, well, funny enough, we've been declared by United Nations a few months ago as the biggest industrial cooperative ecosystem in the world, which, okay, is good for us, but we are better in doing than talking, So we appreciate that also Fortune magazine states that we are one of the companies that will change the world, Well, this is good for us and this makes us proud, but we keep on working, and that's what we do best, working and working hard, And the question is, how do we arrive here? How do we arrive to this situation? Well, this started 80 years ago, April 1941, with a very simple priest, Catholic priest, who came to Mondragon with his cardboard case and many ideas. And he saw a situation in Mondragon, and it was of a Spanish Civil War, a devastating situation, the economy was down, people lost hope. So he thought in starting from scratch with the local communities, with teenagers, that they wanted to believe in something. And they nurtured their brains, they passioned their souls, and they educated their brains. So he started with a small vocational school, a small training engineering school, and the first 5 disciples of this school started the first COP in 1956. Ulgor, later Fagor Domesticos, one of the biggest household makers in the whole Europe, Well, how was all this done? Well, this was done empowering people, believing in the people, believing that in business, the most important thing is people. But it's not a slogan, it's not a marketing statement, it's reality, We think that people are capable, of building things if they work together, if they work in cooperation. If they cooperate, they can arrive further. And with cooperation, we've been building all this small empire, I would say that Mondragon understands cooperation in a very special way, which is cooperation from the principle of solidarity, of human solidarity, which that brings the instrument of intercooperation. And for us, this is a very magical word, because intercooperation means that we can put together and we can pull together resources. We can pull together financial resources, as Mondragon does. We have our own corporate funds, divisional funds, that we help each other when companies goes not that well, we try to interchange flux of money and help each other, Also, we intercooperate at the human level. We relocate people when a company doesn't go as well. We don't release people. We just pass these people to other company that accept these people temporarily or definitely, depends on the situation, And also we intercooperate in terms of knowledge, We are a company that interchange knowledge among all levels, directors, mine directors, different functions at different levels, financial directors, industrial, international, and we create this kind of synergies with economy of scope, economy of scale that give us a biggest leverage when things goes not that well. We are much more resilient. We are much more able to support economic downtowns, and we keep on going together, because we feel that intercooperation is the leverage that really can sustain and can make buildings grow, So Mondragon is an example of something that can be done, which is trying to empower the community, trying to empower people, try to have faith in people, especially thinking in mind that you have to spend, or maybe said you have to invest in education, you have to really make people knowledgeable, and then you have to give them the power to really make their own companies, and in that sense, develop together forward thinking and forward going, And I would like to be strict with the time, and I would like just to finish maybe with a sentence that Father Minareta, our founder, left us years ago, which is, the sign of vitality is not to endure, but is to reborn and to readapt continuously. Mondragon is a continuous experience that tries to fit the new times, and try to adapt like I would say, like a bamboo stick in the East world, in Orient world, in the Far East, where winds, they can blow it down, but it goes up when things goes okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you.
Well, I think that's given us lots of different examples, but there seems to me to be a kind of Venn diagram of what you've all described, which is people-centric decision-making and a kind of ethical framework through which business can situate itself in its community where people are feeling empowered. Let's talk for a minute about the high street, Andrew, and the shape of the economy in a cost of living crisis, post-COVID recovery, still feeling the impacts of that. How is the business community that you represent feeling in that way? And are they seeing they can be more than the sum of their parts through the collaboration that the bid has offered? And are they thinking in that context that Sally and Stuart talked about in terms of how to do good business that also is perhaps more profitable?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who don't don't know much about business improvement districts, they work in 5 years terms. They're brought together by the businesses. You have a plan, and the whole idea of myself and my team work with the businesses to deliver that plan. So I suppose actually, just on your point there, Joan, yeah, the idea of a business improvement district in itself is trying to empower the businesses, because when I came in to run the York one, I mean, obviously I had ideas, but I've always tried to stay true to what the businesses wanted in the business plan. So, the basics haven't really changed. They want to, because obviously we represent a lot of retail and hospitality in the city, so they want cleaner streets. So that's why we have cleaning teams who are there to kind of complement the council ones, and I suppose that's where we do work in collaboration to try make sure we're not duplicating. We work together on that. Businesses want safer streets, so that's again where we have our street rangers, and you probably read a lot about shoplifting, the challenges of that, within retail in particular, and again our rangers are there to kind of support staff there. So yes, the very nature of a bid is trying to empower what businesses want and meet those priorities. But I think it was interesting just talking about purpose, because you don't always like to go back to the COVID times. You feel like we want to move past that. But what I found quite fascinating about that, despite all the terribleness of COVID, was actually we all had a purpose to come together and meet the challenges. And the cooperation in York during that period, I've never seen as good before. We had quick fire meetings with people. We very quickly aligned our goals as a bid, rather than ourselves putting out information versus the Chamber of Commerce versus FSB. We all met together and especially around the COVID support, made sure our communications are consistent, and the local authority being key is that as well. If I'm being honest, since then, that collaboration's gone down. Why is that? It's interesting, isn't it? We had a very clear purpose to overcome COVID. And I think sometimes, without going off subject a little bit here, I think that's where, when you look at good examples of placemaking around the country, if I think back to, when I used to work in economic development, a lot of work in South Yorkshire, there was a purpose to, the coalfields are closed down, what are we going to do about it? It was quite a clear and obvious thing for partners and communities to get involved in. And I think this then ties back to the importance of plans and clear priorities, because unless we have that overarching ambition and understanding of what we're all moving towards, then we will all go off in slightly different directions. And York in some ways is very lucky that we do have, I've already taught Chambers, FSB, a bid. There's Indie York, there's York Professionals. I could go on and on. I mean, there's even streets which have their own trade associations. But do we all, without that purpose, do we all kind of collaborate as best as we could do? I would argue that that is an area where we need to be better. And I suppose we may come on to this. I'm hoping that with devolution, with a clear steer from a mayor, that is where hopefully we may have more opportunity. And that's where we can maybe look to examples of, if you forget about politics, the Tees Valley mayor is often used as a good example of someone who's actually a very clear purpose, because of that, has unlocked funding, and they've been voted back in recently because they're actually being seen to be doing something very, very clear to their community. I suppose coming back to Joan's point very briefly without waffling on too much, where is the high street at the moment? I think I saw lots of good examples of good business, again, during COVID and post-COVID. A lot of small businesses in particular, as you can imagine, had really tough decisions to make. But what I was really heartened by in a tough time was the amount of the smaller businesses in particular who'd say to me, listen, we are going to be taking out this loan, it's going to add another 7 years onto my retirement plans, but I want to look after my staff. My staff, are, if I don't keep them going, a lot of them are going to be in real trouble with the mortgages, etc. And I saw so many examples of that in York, and it was really, really heartwarming to see that, and that is a real positive. But with the cost pressures that businesses are under at the moment, because obviously inflation has continued up, people are having to pay off those loans. We all know the squeeze that we've all felt across the board. If I'm being honest, that sometimes hinders, I think, businesses at the moment in investing in their staff from a skills perspective, from a training perspective, because they just feel like they're on a bit of a treadmill at the moment just to kind of keep afloat. So we were just talking about this beforehand, I think a lot of businesses at the moment, when I talk about where are you, they're just looking at consolidation, just getting through the day-to-day at the moment, with a view to hoping that, if cost pressures do ease, who knows what change of government will bring. They're almost like looking for that optimism a little bit further down the line. But at the moment, I just constantly hear that business is hard work at the moment, and therefore sometimes the ability to invest in staff and opportunity isn't there.
Thank you. You've mentioned a lot of different groups, which I've been in York now for 15 years. There are a lot of different groups who are operating in a relatively small business ecosystem. So maybe there is the potential through the Good Business Charter movement to try to do some consolidation and identification of shared goals in a more explicit way. Stuart, you've had more than 40 years of business experience. Are you feeling optimistic about where York is now, and how do you feel that the idea of a Good Business Charter movement, does that inspire you to think that the city is thinking differently about its business environment alongside its community?
We're feeling quite confident about where we are as a company. We're investing more in our people. We're investing in new buildings in York to facilitate the expansion of what we're doing. We recognise that we have to have we have to get everybody involved in the business, everybody from the warehouse to the stores to head office. Everybody's important. They all need that nurturing. They all need developing. They've all got those aspirations that I was talking about before, which is basically fulfillment and having the resources to make the children have a better life. And everybody's involved in that. It doesn't stop at head office. It's really right down to the shop floor. So we're developing that a lot more. We're Good Business Charter. You need to be a good business, basically, to ensure that you sleep at night and you are just a part of the community. I think we've learned a lot more over the last couple of decades about how you've got to be involved in the communities. And given that we've got 190 different locations, we have to be part of all those communities, which is why we run the foundation in a way that it's only open to people that work for us to be able to apply for something that really means something to them. So when they get the chance to take a cheque for £1,000 or £5,000 or £10,000 to their cause, whatever it be that means something in their community, it makes a huge difference. And it ties all those people into us. They think we're great for doing that and everything else, but it's just being part of that community and doing the right thing for business. And there needs to be more businesses doing the right thing, because there's an awful lot of businesses don't do anything.
Well, that segues very nicely into, Sally, what's your view about the next steps for the Good Business Charter? So you've got about 100 signed up businesses. We've got huge number of businesses in the city. What's the way in which we can all help to frame why being part of the Good Business Charter movement is a really good thing in the context of the difficulties that businesses are facing? How do we persuade those businesses that actually being part of that collective is going to help them in all kinds of ways and to connect with the community as well?
Yeah, I think in terms of, Aviva's lucky we sit on the York Economic Partnership Board as well, and one of the working groups is about Good Business Charter. So one of my colleagues sits on both of those groups, and I think if you practically understanding why it's important, you can work through and go, well, we need to pay people fairly. We can all go, get that. We need to pay people fairly. You know, York is an ecosystem, and actually, particularly in the smaller businesses, that ecosystem of me paying people fairly, then paying my suppliers on time and fairly, has to work. We have to make that work, and paying our taxes fairly. As long as all of that works, it's really important. But I really understand as well that some businesses are struggling. So we have to have a balance. And some businesses will struggle to join because there's certain things in there which, either due to the size of their organisations, they may struggle on. But I think one of the things we need to look at is how does that collective support those smaller businesses. So I can sit here and go, well, we've got a D&I agenda and we've got a wellbeing agenda and why wouldn't we share that and help those smaller businesses? So we can't help them pay their staff fairly. We can't do that. That's not our gift. But some of the other smaller things, which is actually really, really critical to people in terms of how they feel about their work, how they feel about as an individual when they come into work every day, we should be able to support. And I think part of that group is about how do we tap in and go, what are the blockages? What are the blockers for people joining? What are the blockages for people being able to do what should be the fundamentals to their staff? And how we can, as the 100 that have signed up, support the others. And that's what we need to work through. And it's not an easy fix. It's not an easy fix. But at least we should be trying. And even if we don't get hundreds more businesses to sign up, but we get 100 businesses to tick off one or more of those 10 things, that's a success. So maybe the way we count success might be slightly different as well. And actually, if we just got more businesses in York paying the real living wage, that might be the crack. That might be the thing we want to go after. So the charter is brilliant, but we might just want to think about it a little bit differently sometimes, as opposed to just sort of coming in as these big businesses going, you need to tick all these boxes, which is easy for us to say. How we work it is really, really important. So that's probably the next phase we need to look at. Obviously, we want people to sign up, but we have to help people with that.
So, Germán, on that cooperative movement, therefore, which is different but has some similarities
Absolutely.
of bringing different strands of businesses, large and small, together under a collective banner, are there practical ways, because you've been doing this for 80 years, we're in the foothills, are there things that you can now track back and say, by getting people to look at a supply chain collaboration or a procurement or HR policy, what were the kind of key practical ways in which people are really happy to be under the Mondragon cooperative banner?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Jan. I mean, basically speaking, people in Mondragon, they have a maybe different level of compromise with business because they feel, first of all, they own the company, and through that ownership, they're only not part of the results, of the economic results, but also the social results, and also in a way, they can participate in management. So they can elect and be elected, as part of the governing organs like board of directors, social council, different, and that makes them maybe a different level of compromise, a different level of motivation to go to give the best of themselves, and that's something which is, in a way, I think a complete advantage in our model, because people they feel that the company is theirs, and they have a different sense also of company legacy. I mean, we try to receive a company from our previous generation of cooperators in the corporation, and then we want to leave a better company, a better leveraged company for the next generation, and that's I think is an outstanding commitment, and that's also implies, for example, that in terms of capital reserves, we leave the I would say the a major part of the profits in the companies, to try to leverage them financially and try to strengthen them for the next generations, you know. That kind of compromises are in the system, you know, because the sense is not really to milk the cow as much as possible. It's to make the cow bigger and stronger, so next generation can have a big cow, and also the community gets strengthened by having stronger companies, you know, because at the end, the COP system is a system that tries to empower people to try to build more stronger communities, and in a way, much more, I would say, forward going countries in a way, you know.
I'm the daughter of a dairy farmer, so I'm always liking a good cow analogy. So the Mondragon is one model. The other model, and we did try to get somebody, but they were really keen to come and just weren't able to, is the Cleese-Preston model, which is very much based, for anyone who's not familiar with it, around all kinds of different businesses and organizations working within a defined geography to collaborate as much as possible around procurement. So essentially the whole model is around how much do you keep the economic firepower of your business ecosystem within a geography, so you mutually reinforce and support each other. And it looks at supply chains and it looks at procurement. And we have this astonishing Indie York, as Andrew described it, array of small businesses across the firmament. How much more, and perhaps this is a role that good business and really anchor major businesses could do, how much more can we do to foster collaboration and to think about how we spend money within the new devolution geography, what that kind of economic benefit might bring? Andrew, your 900 members, how much collaboration, practically speaking, do they do, or are they all competing with each other and not thinking about that wider system?
Well, I mean, I suppose, again, the fact that when you set a bid up, the funding of a bid, for those of you who don't know, the money comes from the businesses. Yeah. So I suppose that in itself, I mean, the £850,000 we raise a year, which is not huge in the grand scheme of things, but it is businesses putting into a central pot, which therefore gets spent on the programs I've mentioned. You know, Christmas lights, festival, you know, the colour and light projections we did, Ghost in the Garden, whatever else it is. And obviously there's a purpose behind that to drive footfall and all the other things I mentioned. I mean, interestingly, you mentioned Indie York there. And again, we're coming back to a similar theme here. Where did Indie York come from? For those people who don't know, again, this is a voluntary association, probably about 200 members. But that all stemmed from a response to the Boxing Day floods back in 2015 and 16, and it was businesses saying, oh, you know, we've had some really bad national press here, what are we going to do about it? Small businesses, Fossgate and Warmgate in particular, were affected. So that started off with 25 businesses getting together, and now there's about 200, and it's kept going. So they obviously feel there's a benefit to collaboration and purpose. If I'm being honest, sometimes you've got to be realistic about what you can do. So both in the example of the bid and Indie York, I think actually, well, certainly from a bid point of view, we have tried to do sometimes, you know, group buying, etc. And it's hard because even at our level, we represent a lot of small businesses. You know, people have their own suppliers. Sometimes, you know, a business, even though it's based in York, it's controlled from a central office elsewhere. And it can be a bit like trying to herd sheep to get people to get. I mean, funny, if we did try to do it through, you know, gas and electric, you know, trying to get buying power there, and we just could not get that collaboration. But I think what we have learned, and I suppose this is why Indie York is still going strong, is they just go down to the basics of, they have a group of similarly minded people, they meet on a regular basis. And I know that even though I haven't got a record of how much cross-trade has been done, I know that has happened. You know, people have, you know, met other people in the city. They didn't realise they were doing the same thing, or they could supply each other. And it's almost like, you know, you've just got to believe in that ecosystem. But then sometimes you just got to let businesses get on and do it. You know, so it's not that I'm not being ambitious about the ability to collaborate at certain levels. And again, that's where, you know, sometimes, you know, the chambers and the FSB, you know, they have more established programs that you know,
For anyone who doesn't know, we're not talking about the Russian military intelligence. We are talking about the Federation of Small Business, just for clarity.
Absolutely right. Yes, sorry. forget you, so many acronyms. So yes, I mean, I think at a certain level it can work, but I think the very basic of bringing people together on a regular basis, that in itself can help people understand what's happening in the city, they collaborate with each other, and that in itself is a way of doing good business. Just going back to some of the, just previous points that are being made about, obviously, the good business charter, the 10 points that are in there, which I think, as Sally said, sometimes, and this is where the difference between large businesses and smaller businesses, because, I mean, funnily enough, just having taken over a bar in the city centre, we've been going through that whole process of looking at the finances, and we're very much committed to trying to pay living wages, but we've got some hard decisions to make on some of the products. Now, there's a lot of locally sourced products, but I've been looking at that recently and thinking, well, I know I can actually save 30% on that product if I buy this elsewhere. Now but that isn't going to come from the York area where the current product is. I won't name the example. I suppose the point I'm making here is sometimes for a small business it can be very difficult to hit all those things. You've actually got to make a choice, and the question is, yes, what choice is right? Is it, in this case, being able to keep paying that wage, or even being able to keep as many staff on as you have done, or is it that ethical sourcing, localing sourcing? You sometimes can't meet both, and that's, I think, sometimes where it is really tough for small businesses. It's impossible sometimes to tick all the boxes, and you've got to make some hard decisions.
Stuart, you look like you were desperate to jump in.
Yeah, sometimes it's not just about sourcing of product and things for small businesses, it's about sharing best practice, whether that's for charities or businesses. And we had an example this morning that we support the food bank at Bell Farm, and she's a remarkable lady doing an absolutely amazing job, but not very technically savvy. So she said, I often get food at Morrison's that I can't get picked up because I've got to send everybody a text message, and it takes me hours to do that, and by that time the food's gone. So we just helped to set up a WhatsApp group with all the, and it's like just send one message and somebody will come back and be able to go and pick it up for you. And just sharing basic, simple, best practice amongst people helps a lot. And I was thinking about Sally as well with the group. It would be nice to have, I aspire to be part of that group. I don't meet all the requisites at the moment, but I really do aspire to be part of that. And therefore you might get another 200 or 300 that are on that journey coming to it.
That's something we need to pick up at the next partnership board, I think, the economic partnership, about how do we break, it shouldn't be just an inclusive group, should it? If you're in, how do we help?
Yeah. It sounds like there's a sequencing thing of you can be in, but you don't necessarily
it's about ambitions,
hit all of it at the same time.
It's been on that line to do it, I think, is really important. I think there's examples across the city about sharing, and I think sharing ideas that Stuart just said there is really key. And I don't want to keep talking about the COVID days, but I remember we had to open up our York office because we have people that take basically the death claims lines and the critical illness lines. We had to be open in COVID, so people, because you don't want to be doing those type of roles at home. So we opened up a floor in the building, and we made the sign so people, you had your one-way system and the tape and all of that. And at the time, I was vice chair of the community furniture store at the other side of town. So I was in York in the day, and then I printed off a load of extra signs, and then drove across the community furniture store that happens to run the WIFAS scheme. People don't know what the WIFAS scheme is. The scheme that is if people are rehomed or are going through difficulty and they need a furniture voucher, basically. So if you can imagine in lockdown, there were a massive increase in the people that needed those vouchers due to definitely horrific situations in their home life. So we were rehoming people, so we had to get back open. So I was taking signs from Aviva and tape, when we couldn't get hold of tape. Do you remember those days when you couldn't get hold of black and white tape? Taking it from Aviva and then helping another industry. And I think tiny things where you partner together, we have to crack that as well. It's really hard though, and I think back to where you purchase from, I sit here going, I wish I could buy all my sandwiches in my office from the local sandwich shop. We have a national contract, and we'll have a national contract on all sorts of different things, and one of the things we're looking at is how do we crack that so we can go not local on everything, but we must be able to go local on something as simple as sandwiches. At the minute we're not, and they're awful. So we need to be able to go local on certain things.
Here's to the sandwich. So my final question, I'm going to throw it open to the audience, and I'm obviously wearing my higher education hat on here, but it strikes me that and Germán, I'm really interested in hearing about the Mondragon Business School. You're all, at one degree or another, up to your elbows in business challenges. How does education, how should higher education, further education, schools work more closely with business? Is there an opportunity that we're missing to think about the interface? So one of the things I've been mulling over recently is, in a UK context, the opportunity to think about post-16 education very differently as part of a long-term economic, social and cultural plan for the country in a very different way, because I think the environment in which kids and young people are moving into the labour market is very different to what it has been. And I think sometimes the early school years becomes the dominant narrative, and we're missing the opportunity perhaps to think about business and schools at the senior level to work more closely together, let alone with universities. So I'm going to start with Germán in the kind of business school example, because I forgot to ask you about it last night, and how, what does that look like practically, and what the benefits are for the cooperative movement and the working with higher education?
Well, cooperative movement in the Basque Country, the modern experience started with education. We were a real small vocational school, and in our father founder, José María Mendarrieta, mind, education was something, and as he defined, it was the only asset that doesn't deteriorate with time. It grows. Knowledge grows with time, And it's like love. The more you give, the more you get back, So to some extent, he was a pioneer. He was forward thinking in the idea that education should be, first of all, dual. I mean, learning by doing. And the first COP members, they were maybe studying working in the morning, studying in the afternoon, because he created, apart from the school, a COP to try to help the students to pay their own studies. So it was continuous, and also it was at the same time that working also continues. I mean, it's a non-stop process. So you never have to stop getting education, So we've been always very active, in people's education in the all way until retirement. We'll be very active in executive education in our own Ottawa center. We have a special center that we train there all our people from workers to managers, at all levels. We're always very active, in trying to get the latest trends in management, apart from our own core principles and way of doing business, So we have been always very, very curious to understand how is the world understanding productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, and that trying to implement in our system. For us, it's a non-stop ongoing process that should be following you all your probably professional life and beyond, because even our retiree people still sometimes crowd with us, still is linked with the group, maybe emotionally, but they are still there, and they are still giving courses, they are still teaching to our young students, they are still trying to pass the experience to the young generations. So it's part of our way of thinking, And the university is especially active in the business school area in entrepreneurship. We have a special degree called Mondragon Team Academy. It's a degree in leadership, innovation, and development. And we try to train our young students. 4 years entrepreneurship, trying to also expose them to projects from the beginning, and they start with the company from the first year, and they develop this company not only in Europe, they also go to South America, they go to America, North America, they go to Asia, in countries like Korea, like US, like Costa Rica, and they try to develop the company in these countries, and they try to get entrepreneurial skills by doing, So that's part of our education concept, It's always one step further you have to try to give to our people.
Sally, I'm going to bring you in here, perhaps maybe to reflect again about the place. I mean, Aviva is this global giant financial services industry, and yet you have chosen very explicitly and intentionally to be a really anchor partner in the place. What are you hoping success looks like in 5 years' time from the point of view of Aviva and their role in this community?
Great question. I think success, and it might not be 5 years, it might be 10 years. Because actually,
I think I've just freaked Lydia now.
Yeah. Success, I think, that is a community centre that we want to be there sustainably for the future. Not for 5 years, not for 10 years. We are focusing on the primary, actually, age. There will be secondary students coming in there, but it's about primary. It's about them feeling wanted. It's about them feeling sort of needed by the city, and that they have that sort of self-respect to go on and learn and be part of the city. And I think where that centre is, they don't even feel part of Acomb, never mind feeling part of York. So how do we connect that together is really critical. And why, well, you say, why have we picked that? Well, we want to be the employability partner there and really help with that. We're not the experts on it. We have a great early years career team in York who are actually going to help develop some programmes there. But we can't moan about the talent we get coming into our organisation if we don't invest in it. And we've moaned for so many years if we need to invest in the talent in our city. And we need to keep talent in our city. And we've got brilliant universities and colleges and schools. And then people leave. And they go because we can't offer those opportunities at that early careers. So we need to fix that. So we've got T-level students doing internships at the minute. T-levels is the new sort of version of BTEC for people that don't know. I'm only just learning about that one. So I have a student with me who actually sits with every Tuesday, and he comes in for a year and he's learning about business management. And he helps me for a year, and at the end of that, you can imagine how he can bounce on from a job of that, because he's actually worked in a business for a year as part of his, and he's only 17. So that's his experience he's gained. So how do we start at that age? And have apprenticeships programs, graduate programs, and work through. But the place is special. I think a real special program where we sat down, I think with Mary is in the room, and said, what do we do as two anchor institutions in the city? What can we crack together? And we could have tried lots of different things, and I think everybody felt passionately that let's go for that. We can grab it, we can hold it, we've got space, we've got a need, and we've actually got some capability in this space to make it happen. So we're trying it. We're hoping that it's a real success in the community, love it, and the people in there ultimately thrive. But the measure is 10 years' time, unfortunately, not 5.
Okay, stand corrected. Stuart and Andrew, to finish us off before we throw out to the audience, lifelong learning. I mean, you've been running a business for 44 years. How much more could we all collaborate together in that lifelong learning space in the way that Germán has talked about?
I think all the businesses, collaboration, whether it's local or international, and we obviously have an international supply chain that we work with, and you have to realise the difference in these different places in the world and how their needs differ from ours. But I think we have a one-size-fits-all policy practically for children these days, and we don't recognise their differences. And we should be supporting them a lot more as they're developing through their early years and their teens, to give them something that they can work with. If they're not going to be going to university and everything else, we need to give them something fulfilling to work at and to train at in order to be able to contribute to society. Because at the moment, they're thrown out.
Very much. Andrew, finish us off talking about the future workforce of the city in the context of the bid.
Well, I suppose on this subject of placemaking, I think this is where, when we talk about good business, sometimes you obviously think in quite black and white terms sometimes, but you have to look more holistically. And coming back to university, actually, I was just thinking what you were saying there, and I'll give you an example tonight. You know, my daughter's going to the university running track, where she for very low cost can join friends. You know, it's good for her well-being. It's a fantastic facility. So yes, that's nothing to do with education per se, but that is a facility that we, as people who live in York, can use thanks to the university. Well, first of all, putting it there, but making it accessible, and that's a big part in our life. I can see some other runners here tonight, actually, who also use that facility. So I suppose what I'm saying is sometimes it's, in that case, how does a university contribute? That is a big part to our lives, and obviously there's other tennis facilities, etc., which is that big eco picture. Because why do people want to stay and locate in a place? It's often because it is enjoyable to live, and it meets various boxes just outside the basic work. I think in terms of where are we going, I think this is why, for me, because we again talked about graduate retention opportunities, I think this is why, the York Central site in particular, and I'd also say, the bioeconomy that we often hear about that surrounds York, these are critical for our long-term plan. which comes back to what is our long-term plan? Are we all clear on that? But yes, because quite often when we speak to people about why you're not staying in York, it's a quaint historic place, retail and hospitality great, but there's no opportunities for me. So let's really grasp what York Central is about, be clear what that opportunity is, because actually, for me, it's huge potential. We have this amazing city that none of us want to knock about or change. We can't even if we wanted to, but we do have this second city centre, which if we get that right and complement that opportunity with this, then what a great environment, because you have an amazing place, but also the potential for some real exciting, hopefully new businesses kind of coming in, new economic opportunity. Obviously, I know universities are very keen to be part of that as well. So I think, again, that placemaking element, looking more holistically, is key.
Brilliant. For Germán's benefit, York Central is a huge brownfield site right by the train station, is now under development, and the aim is, well, certainly in my head, that you would create a kind of King's Cross of the North over a 10-15-year programme of investment in housing, retail, leisure, culture and business. I'll show it to you later.
Very good.
So I feel like we've covered a lot of ground and you've all been very patient, so I'm really keen to hear from all of you. There is a roving mic somewhere. Yes, Suze is getting her exercise in and is happy to trot to. So who would like to kick us off with some reflections? And I can see in the third row my lovely colleague Mary Howarth.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your insights. Really interesting. I feel like one thing we haven't talked about is evidence and impact. And I know it's a key feature of the place, and we've just set on a course of action, but we're only going to continue that if we know it's actually fundamentally making a difference. And similarly, the Good Business Charter is undergoing a really interesting exercise at the moment where it's going to be reviewing, working with researchers at the university, the impact that being a good business city has. So those 100 businesses, what difference has it made beyond ticking those 10 boxes? So I'm just curious to know a little bit about sort of your reflections on the role of evidence and impact, so that we don't just continue to do stuff, but we do stuff that actually makes a difference.
Germán, how does Mondragon decide whether it's successful when it kicks off a new endeavour?
Well, we try to measure as well the impact of our business in the environment. Sustainability has been always inside our DNA. And we have a special department trying to I would say, indoctrinate our cooperatives. That is something that they have to measure, and we have some corporate aims in terms of carbon figure print and this kind of issues, to try to at least in this whole group get a level where we can think it's acceptable our stability. That's important from the beginning, because at the end we are part of a community, and our people are in the community, so it's where they live. We work where we live there, so we have to be very aware that is important for the future development of the generations.
Andrew, you're on your second go at the bid, so I'm imagining the fact that they voted for it a second time meant you produced some kind of evidence to say this really matters and is making a difference.
Yeah, well, I suppose going back to it's what we call the Ronsteel effect. We do what we say on the tin, I suppose. I've tried to always look at what the businesses want and focus on, are we delivering that within the 5-year period? And yes, I think we started off with a 76% yes vote. That went up to about 90% when we had the second one, and we will be up for election again in a year's time. So we're hoping we can improve on that. But so I suppose there in itself is a measure, and again, keep coming back to the same thing. The whole idea of we set a plan for 5 years. At our AGM and in other events, we say how far we are achieving that, and then by the end of it, we say what we've achieved. But importantly, we're also honest sometimes where we can't do things. I talked about where we haven't quite got the group purchasing thing right. We said we wanted to do more around last mile delivery with businesses in the city, and there's a number of reasons why that hasn't got to where I think it should do. I think there's huge potential in York for that, but I will have to explain why we haven't quite achieved that. So I think you have to be honest as well about your failures, as well as just bleating on about your successes. And I think if you do that, honesty I think is key right across businesses. I suppose coming back to actually I mean, you can measure endless statistics, can't you? But I suppose staff retention's a key one, isn't it? You know, because, you know, if you're actually keeping and maintaining staff, that is probably a good indicator that hopefully you're doing the right things, because, you know, you can't always be giving out pay rises, you know, every year. So there's got to be other reasons why staff will stay with you for 5, 10 years. So I think that is a key one as to understanding whether you're probably going in the right direction as a business.
Anyone else have a reflection, or should we take
I can pick up a little bit. So I think internally in Aviva, you can imagine we've got data coming out of everywhere. But I think, you know, one of the things we've done internally, actually, we have our internal survey about how people are feeling to come to work every day. And we look at, are you planning on staying with Aviva? But all sorts, there's hundreds of questions we ask, and we reflect on that at a site-based level. So at our York Advisory Board this week, we sat and we went through the data about last week, about what our staff are saying in York and how we can make that better for them. So internally, we do that. I think the first thing we did at our very first Pride of Place board was look at the data. And we had Claire from the council that came and shared the data about the city and the insight behind it. So not just looking at data, but tell us the story. What is the story about that? The qualitative data, the quantitative data. When we started talking about the place, we got qualitative data, and then we went and spoke to people and got that quantitative data, so we know we're making difference. And we have to balance that, because I think, as I talked right at the beginning, if you look at higher level data for York, it sometimes fails us, because it just becomes a bit bland across the city and we all look hunky-dory and it's all fine. That doesn't quite work for York, so you have to dig into it, to make sure we really understand what's going on and then track it.
Data will only take you so far if it's not interpretable.
Exactly.
More questions? There's a lady here in the second row, Susan.
Thank you. I've not been in York long, and people quite often ask me, why did you come? And I thought it was about cladding, but Stuart's just reminded me that actually, although I didn't know anyone here in York, there is a point to my question. Though I didn't know anyone, there was a pair of jelly wellies, sparkly ones, ankle ones, that wanted to come home. And I didn't realise that, and they've now got, there's now 4 extra pairs of boots along with the jelly wellies. The thing, I'd like to go back to something that you were talking about right at the beginning, and I've been in York now 2 years and about 7 months, and I'm very aware that there's little pockets of interest, little groups doing things, but it's very disparate. And my question is, what on earth is going to bring everyone together so that at some point we can say to the UNESCO heritage status that we're looking for, that yes, we'll go for it as a group? What is it that will bring the city together?
Rather than having a definitive answer to that, I'm just reflecting on what you're saying a bit, because I mean, this is sometimes where it's interesting, isn't it? You know, we talk about the importance of localism and local businesses getting together, and businesses getting together full stop. That's sometimes counterintuitive to how businesses work, because actually, you know, businesses are competitors as well, aren't they? And we ourselves as a bid sometimes have, I mean, for example, back in the day when we used to fund the Micklegate soapbox race, you know, great, you know, the businesses loved it there, it was good for the city. But then, as you can imagine, I had businesses from Goodramgate and other streets saying, hey Andrew, why are you funding that and not funding us? You know? And it was actually quite competitive, because actually those different streets had associations and they weren't that bothered about working together. They wanted the best for their street. So it is tricky. And I think that's where you need to kind of pick your wins sometimes. You sometimes got to recognise that there will naturally be competition, because that's what there is in business sometimes. But I think where I think we could be better as a city is identifying, you know, what are the, I mean, I can be a bit blasé here, what are the top 10 things that actually, regardless of what street you're on, you know, we should be coming together and doing something about it. So, for example, the reason I mentioned last mile delivery and why I'm a bit frustrated by this is, for me, this is a this is something which we should be doing as a city, because we're a flat city, we're a compact city. We look at all the problems we have with large vehicles going into buildings, etc. Surely we must be able to, out of anybody, be well placed to do a cycling hub where things are delivered and then green cycling couriers deliver it around. Now that is something which, regardless whether you're on Micklegate, Gudrumgate, Fossgate, I think everybody would agree that is something actually we should be working together to do, and we should be well placed as a city to do it. So I think there's certain things where, you know, you've got to say, yes, that is something that all businesses would work towards and would agree with. And I mean, I know, speaking to the businesses I represent, they'd all love to be part of that, but we need we need money. You know, we can't ignore the fact there hasn't been much money floating around. You need money to set these initiatives off. But you need strong leadership as well. You need people who are willing to kind of blast through the bureaucracy, blast through the groups sometimes, stand up in front of people and say, come on, are you with me? So is the mayor going to be that person? I hope so, because I think we've seen it in other places. It can work. But yes, you need strong leadership, you know. So let's see what the mayor can do. You need that from the city council. You know, and that is key to making anything happen, especially in a place like York, where you're absolutely right, there are a lot of well-meaning but disparate groups.
Maybe York just needs to get over it.
It's definitely a theory. Lady, just here, and then I'll take two together, just so we can cram in as many. Suze, don't go anywhere, because there's a man to your left who...
Hello, thank you for this very interesting talk. I've got a question to Sally. So you obviously want to, you're interested in attracting as many businesses as possible to the good business chart. And taking Stuart's company example, that they want to be a part of it, but they don't meet all the requirements. So my question is, do you offer any advice, or does Aviva offer any advice to those businesses to sort of help them to take actions to achieve those goals? I mean, obviously you cannot do the job for them, but are you able to offer any advice to those businesses?
I can touch on that a little bit. So Aviva doesn't own the Good Business Charter.
Yes.
So we are a member. So it's not our initiative. But we were one of the core members to sign at the beginning.
But you see its potential.
But we see its potential,
and its opportunity
absolutely.
to grow.
And I think, as I say, one of the offshoots of the Economic Partnership Board of the Council is to get people to, I'm not used to this, to get people to talk about the Good Business Charter. And I think that group there needs to, I don't sit on that group, but I'm going to take an action away to speak to John that sits on that group from Aviva to start to feed in some of these conversations. Because if we can't get the businesses who can tick 7 or 8 boxes on that part of it, we're not having the right conversations. And we should be able to help. I'm not the right person to commit to that in Aviva, but I think as a board, I think we should be. Because as I say, even if we can commit to get 100 businesses in the city just to tick one more of those boxes is better for the city. So we shouldn't be we need you to tick all of them. Yeah.
Sounds like an action.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Davis. I live in Acomb, not 100 miles away from York High. I'm an expert in how humans develop in order to learn efficiently. I've been here for 3 years. I'm a newcomer. I've written to the university, I've written to the local authority, I've written to the schools. This place works in the most amazing set of silos. I will get up tomorrow morning, I'll drive to Sunderland, and I will continue working on a study we're doing, screening 400 children. I'd happily have done it in York, but there's no engagement. It's really, the siloing is really very, very acute. And when I've been to the York University Small Business Group, there every other business says the same. When they come in, they find it very hard to break into York. So I can work on Merseyside, Sunderland, Newcastle. I'm down in Brighton even, but York now.
Okay.
I mean, I think you sometimes got to say things how they are, and I agree with you. Yeah, that's not me being defeatist, because obviously I wouldn't be doing my job if I thought it was. But yes, when I speak to businesses, and I suppose actually even before I set up the bid, quite a few people kind of did a, "Oh, that's going to be hard work, Andrew." And I was like, "Oh, why is that?" And they said, "York is a complacent place, you know." And I think I have seen that in places sometimes. And I'll give the example. Because you know, I sit on the High Street Task Force, so I go see other towns and cities. And I do sometimes see businesses coming together in a more collaborative and cohesive way sometimes. But again, that because there is a real purpose that they have to. So Sunderland, I mean, fun enough, that's my home city, so I know it well. I know quite a lot of the team who are up there. And they have huge, you know, we beat ourselves up about having 7% shop vacancy in the city. They have 30% in certain of their streets because it is a deprived area. But because of that purpose and everybody is very visible, they will get together a bit more, and actually they sometimes have more cohesive plans where, if I'm being honest, and you know, without being disingenuous to some of my businesses, there isn't the effort there sometimes because they're kind of like, well, we get 8 million tourists a year, they keep coming back. What is that incentive to engage? I don't need to. So I think that there is a little bit of that, which I've recognised in this city compared to others. And that's not me wanting to be negative. How we overcome that, again, we've touched on a few things today about, I think, clear, you know, strong leadership, strong plans, that ability for us all to buy into a vision. I think that's the thing that we have lacked as a city over the years. And you know, I'm ever hopeful that there'll be more clarity on that, maybe with the mayor kind of going forward in devolution.
The mayor's got a lot to live up to at the moment.
It's good that they're not here, isn't it? It's good that we just give all the actions to him.
Very conscious we're volunteering him into a lot, but actually, having met with him a few times, I don't think it's an unreasonable assumption that he's going to shape some of that, because he certainly said it in various public fora before he got shut up by the election. Stuart, you were going to come in?
There's so many things that we need strong leadership to address within the city, whether it's transportation or anything else like that. To me, it's crazy. We've got all these park and rides that we don't use as a hub system, so that we don't have every bus that's coming in from Pocklington, or we have 2 buses a day in the village where I live, which is ridiculous. But if they drove to the park and ride and then came back and started again, they'd be doing the same journeys that they're doing at the moment. We'd have half the traffic in the city centre, and it should be something that a local authority or a mayor can sort out, because at the moment it's just a mess.
Okay. I mean, I sat on the Joseph Rowntree Foundation York Committee for 7 years, and I was always struck by how many tiny grassroots organisations are doing, literally street by street, amazing work, but thematically, probably across maybe 5 or 6 areas of activity, and they're almost unaware of each other. So I agree with you as well. There is a lot more we could do with a bit more top-down helicoptering in terms of identifying what those key priorities might look like. Do we have other questions? We're almost out of time, but Suze, there's a lady behind you, and then before we answer your question, I'm going to come to the gentleman on the second row, and then we'll wrap up. So far away.
Hello, thanks for such a great number of speakers this morning. I work for a small charity on Lowther Street. We're Door 84 Youth and Community Centre. And one of our real struggles is applying for funding and the amount of hours it takes to do that, particularly if we are a charity without an income stream. So my plea to any businesses really that want to connect with their community and really get that pipeline of your future employees is to, where possible, commit to support over a number of years, ideally. It's really heartening to hear the number of years that the place has got in terms of their measure, because that's what's needed. And so the way we operate in terms of trying to connect with businesses is to say things like, please come and row for us when we want to take part in the dragon boat race. It's a team event for an organisation perhaps, but for us it's really difficult to have enough rowers to take part and to fundraise for ourselves. So it's just really a little insight for how small charities are operating in the same way as businesses are facing all of those cost of living crises and so on. We're struggling also, and so any little bit of connected thinking really supports us, particularly where a business's surplus could be incredibly useful to a charity. Thank you.
Brilliant. And Sue's gentleman here in the second row.
Hi, thanks very much for an interesting chat. This is actually a question for Sally. There's been a lot of talk about community, place and support here, which is great. And I'm just wondering how you open a dialogue with Aviva to try and get them to engage with a sector. I'm asking from a background of community energy. I'm a member of Whitby Esk Energy, which is a community hydro project nearby here. I'm also a member of Community Energy England and the British Hydro Association. And we're finding declining support for insurance for our schemes. And I'm just wondering how we can engage with Aviva to find out why that is. Thank you.
Right, should we, who wants to tackle the how do we work more with grassroots community charitable organisations? I mean, it backs into my reflection with Joseph Rowntree Foundation of how many very small charitable endeavour that are quite hidden and invisible at that corporate level, and there must be something more that we can do. And certainly Joseph Rowntree Foundation have over the years tried to create facilitatory platforms through which those small charities can come together. But I certainly agree with you on multi-year as well. I mean, the festival is entirely supported by external fundraising, and multi-year is my holy grail dream, so I'm very sympathetic. But
no, just a reflection. I think I'll come back to the question specifically about Aviva, or we could maybe pick that one up offline actually. In terms of the small charities, I sit on with two hats on. So I sat on the Prosperity Fund board as part of the council. I represented industries in the city, so I was not there as Aviva. I was represented there as businesses going, are those things they're going to invest in? What people in Aviva were interested in, and are as a community rather than Aviva. On the flip side, and there was no conflict of interest because I wasn't involved in the money allocation, the community furniture store bid for some money out of that fund. 27 pages worth of bidding for a minimal amount of money. So I hear what the lady at the back is saying. It was ridiculous. The charity does not have the skill to do it. The way the funding doesn't work, so there needs to be something done to crack that. I've not got the answers, but it is pretty obvious that we can't expect small businesses to be writing 27 pages to get £5,000. It is bonkers.
Yeah. Writing grant applications is almost a full-time job for every small charity, and there are so many opportunities that get missed because the process is so labour-intensive. There isn't a great answer because you can't find grant application writers anywhere. We have done some experimentation for a small charity I work with using ChatGPT to try and fill out these forms using artificial intelligence. And it's getting better. And the more that you work with it and the more that you teach it, the better it gets at trying to do these things. But you've just got to judge the results yourself.
Right, so we are slightly over our time, so apologies for that, but it's been a really fascinating conversation and a huge amount of ground covered. So thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you to Andrew and Stuart for being super subs and essentially allowing me to hijack them for a Monday morning in order for us to be able to do this panel given the election period. Thank you so much to Germán for coming all the way from Bilbao to tell us about the fascinating Mondragon Corporation. It's really inspirational. Thank you to Sally and to Aviva for anchoring and sponsoring and being such fantastic support, not only for the place, which is coordinated by the university, but for the festival, and for essentially seeing its role in a very different way than from when I first moved to York 15 years ago. I think we're in a very different space now, and I think there is this real opportunity for us to all work together at that strategic helicopter, big plan, big vision that we've all volunteered the mayor into driving, but also at that grassroots level and how we can actually coordinate and coalesce more efficiently and more effectively to deliver a better outcome for everybody who lives around us, our neighbours, our friends, our communities. Thank you so much. It's been a real privilege for the festival to be able to host this event. The entire festival was built around the idea of working really closely across the city to bring different voices, sometimes very hidden voices, together. So I want to thank all of you, our audience, for sharing your perspectives and reflections as well. There's lots more events for the next few days, and I hope to see lots of you at those events. But for now, again, can I ask you to thank our amazing speakers and thank all of you.